Ads are annoying, but ad blockers prevent publishers from making money. What if you could support your favorite websites, YouTube creators, Twitch streamers, social accounts, and many more ad-free and without paying anything, and even make some money yourself? It's not a pipe dream, it's airtime. Go to airtime.bogosity.tv and get the browser extension, and you'll earn cryptocurrency for the sites you visit, and so will the publisher. This is not a crypto miner. You and the publisher will both get part of the reward from current miners of the BitTube cryptocurrency, with no middleman taking a cut. Even if the publisher hasn't signed up yet, his tube will be put into a dedicated wallet that he can claim upon sign up. You can also use your tube to tip publishers and even purchase products. Airtime monetizes users and publishers with no ads or crypto miners. Go to airtime.bogosity.tv and start making money now. Welcome to the Bogosity Podcast for the 13th of January 2019, the podcast that's bigger than you and you are not me. This is your host, Shane Killian, and joining me this week is a guy you've seen on some of the live streams, and maybe you've seen his own channel as well. Welcome to the podcast, Hoplu.
Hello, this is Hoplu. It's great to be here.
Let's deacclimate the news of the bogus. Well, last year we covered FOSTA, the Allow States and Victims to Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act of 2017, which ostensibly was to stop sex trafficking, but actually decimated Section 230 protections, leaving websites liable for the actions of their users. We've talked about the censorship and lawsuits that it's resulted in, and we also talked about how clear it was that it was actually putting sex workers at much greater risk because they could no longer vet their clients online. And it also increased sex trafficking by taking away tools that law enforcement used to track down and arrest actual sex traffickers.
It's almost as if technological illiterates making laws ends disastrously.
Who would have thought, huh? Well, now, a new report by Marinus Analytics, online sex ads are actually proliferating. Despite government claiming victory after the plunge in online sex ads after the seizure of Backpage, in October, there were some 146,000 online sex ads posted every day compared to 133,000 back when Backpage was still up. The big difference is that Backpage had the incentive to work with law enforcement to find and arrest actual sex traffickers while making the work of legitimate sex workers much safer. These new sites have no such incentive since they operate outside the law.
It's like if you took the example of a drug deal going down in Walmart, and then you shut down the entire chain. That's about what the logic of FOSTA really is.
Yeah, and so then they just meet in the middle of the woods somewhere where you can't see them. So
exactly.
So not only have FOSTA and its sister legislation SESTA not made things safer and not resulted in less sex trafficking, it's actually increased advertising, enabled censorship of the internet, diverted law enforcement resources from taking down actual sex traffickers in cooperation with websites towards dangerous and wasteful law enforcement action against websites, made it more difficult for law enforcement to track down and arrest actual traffickers, and is putting even more people at risk.
Well, ain't that the way it goes? Laws passed, we lose liberties, we lose our safety, and nothing of which was promised gets achieved.
Well, all sorts of politicians and celebrities cheered SESTA and FOSTA when they were passed. Where are they now that every single prediction of the critics has come true?
They're at the same place where all the other laws of which have ended in failures.
Yeah, because no one ever admits it when things go pear-shaped, just like after the financial crisis, they were blaming free market and deregulation in like the most regulated industry in the country.
Oh, that never fails to amuse me.
Yeah, it's never their fault. Say, if you're tired of the promos in this podcast, well, the patrons got it early and with no ads or promos. Just go to patreon.bogosity.tv and donate at any level. Do you have children or nieces or nephews? Are you homeschooling or just want to counter some of the socialist indoctrination most children get in school? If so, go to bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins, and you'll be taken to a website where you can get some great books for elementary-aged children. The Tuttle Twins books are books about liberty and free market economics that include children's versions of Bastiat's The Law, Leonard Read's I, Pencil, and Hayek's The Road to Serfdom, as well as books about the Federal Reserve and how regulations protect business cronies. They'll learn about the harm caused by eminent domain, or regulations passed in the name of safety, and fundamental concepts of liberty. And as you can see from the sample pages on the website, they're all easy to read and nicely illustrated. They're just $9.99 a piece, or get a special discount as well as free bonuses when you purchase all 5. You can even buy in bulk to donate to schools and local libraries. So get the Tuttle Twins books at bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins. Oh, Joe Arpaio, you know him, right? The drug warrior, immigration warrior, birther, and multiple offender, including abuse of power, wrongful arrest, misuse of funds, racial profiling, failure to investigate sex crimes, election law officials, and even torture?
Yeah.
Well, among all of the other laws he seems to be completely unaware of, he seems clueless of the fact that you can't sue people for defamation when what they said about you was absolutely true. But that's what he's about to learn as the New York Times moves to have his $150 million defamation lawsuit against them thrown out.
Eesh.
Their filing reads, quote, Arpaio is a public figure who has failed to allege facts that could plausibly establish either that the challenged column is substantially false or that the Times published it with the requisite degree of fault. Actual malice, i.e. that the Times published a false statement about him with knowledge of its falsity or with serious doubts about its truth. In light of the expensive public record supporting the truth of the factual statements in the column, any attempt to amend the complaint to try to plead actual malice would be futile, and dismissal on this basis is properly with prejudice. The column broke no new factual ground about Arpaio, or as many Arizona officials have described it, his long reign of terror as senior law enforcement official. The column merely summarized the extensive public record regarding Arpaio's tenure as sheriff and offered opinions about his political career. In short, the statements in the column about Arpaio are not only true, but the column also constitutes core political speech protected by the First Amendment.
And of course, this man is trying to shut it down as that is a threat to his tyrannical order.
Yeah, he really doesn't like the Bill of Rights. The complaint, if you want to know about Sheriff Joe Arpaio, this complaint goes on listing numerous cases of his wrongdoing, including the infamous Tent City Jail, the poor quality food he was serving them, including food that was rotted and moldy, including the infamous green bologna, the denial of adequate medical care, physical abuse, sometimes resulting in the permanent disability or even death of the inmate, suicide and other unexplained deaths, chain gangs, the pink underwear scandal, failure to investigate sexual assaults, and racial profiling, especially of Latinos, and resulting in serious Fourth Amendment violations. Most of these things Arpaio himself admitted and even bragged about.
No, this guy is not just an assortment of all the things that we love. And oh boy, I want to see, oh my, what an assortment.
And it also mentions his conviction for contempt of court that we covered on this podcast, which Trump pardoned him for.
Of course he did.
But I mean, just this document alone, it's so well documented, it's pretty much the only evidence you need of the total lack of police accountability in this country, evidenced by the fact that Arpaio himself is not in prison.
People like to say we live in a police state. I think we're already past a police state. I think that the police... It's undoubtable at this point that the police have more rights than the civilians that they are duty to... Actually, wait. They aren't duty to protect. Ha!
That's true. We covered that too. But it's like, what does a policeman have to do to get convicted and thrown in jail in this country?
They have to mess up really bad that the media just goes on and on about him till it just can't be avoided anymore, which unfortunately can't happen for every single one of them.
Yeah. If you're on the Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or hotel, anyone on that network can get your traffic. Do you really trust all of those strangers? For that matter, do you really trust your ISP?
A VPN can protect you from prying eyes, disguise your location, and even foil government censors. It's essential in this day and age, so go to vpn.bogosity.tv and you'll be taken to BoxPN. Starting at just $2.99 a month, you can get unlimited high-speed connections to VPN servers all over the world, and they don't log connections, so your privacy is assured. Traveling abroad, just VPN home, and don't worry about what those other governments are doing. Back at home, stop your ISP from traffic shaping and messing with the quality internet access you're paying good money for. You can connect from multiple machines at once, including your smartphone or tablet, and it supports all the secure standards, including OpenVPN and SSTP. Bypass censors and surveillance with your own secure VPN connection. Go to vpn.bogosity.tv.
A recurring theme in a lot of the stories we've covered in the last year or two has been regarding the growing centralization of the internet. The internet, of course, became as great as it is because of how decentralized most of its services are, but there are still a few that are centrally managed. One of them is ARIN, the American Registry for Internet Numbers, which manages the distribution of IP addresses for most of North America. Well, ARIN has now asked Canada's government to require ISPs and other large companies to maintain a database of IP addresses and who they belong to.
Oh boy, no, that's gonna be very good for cybersecurity.
And the reason? What else? Tracking down copyright infringement.
Oh boy, copyright infringement. That thing of which has been proven repeatedly to not affect sales numbers.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
There's already a database of IP blocks to help track infringers, but those aren't linked to end users. These blocks are given to ISPs and other registrars, and then those ISPs assign them to users or websites or whoever. Well, as the IPv4 address space gets used up, and that's that, number thing, the much more plentiful IPv6 addresses are starting to be used, but that means that once a company gets a block of IPv6 addresses, they might not have to contact ARIN again for years, if ever. I mean, that's just how bloody many of these things there are. So ARIN is going to lose their ability to maintain up-to-date records of which IP addresses are given to whom. And they said, quote, "As a result, ARIN will no longer have a mechanism to require compliance with maintaining up-to-date records of IP dispersals, as no other regulatory or other mechanisms exist that would require this information to be updated and preserved. It is likely many organizations will rarely or never do so." Yeah, privacy, imagine that.
Yeah. Those plebeians can't have privacy. We need to make them vulnerable to nosy governments and hackers, so that we can go after our scaremongering cronies, of whom want to protect their overpriced intellectual properties.
And of course, their crying disaster, quote, "The failure of persons entrusted with the assignment of internet numbers to third parties to maintain accurate records as to the users of those numbers and basic identifying information could wreak havoc in the ability of society to integrate the internet into legal, political, and business norms."
Ain't that the way it always goes?
Who said the internet should be integrated into legal, political, and business norms?
Yeah.
So, of course, since there's no way they can make it happen, they gotta run to government to do it for them. They want companies that assign IP addresses to third parties to have a legal requirement to keep an up-to-date database of the people they've given them to. Quote, "The federal government should require that those receiving large blocks of numbers maintain an up-to-date registry of the assignment of internet numbers, and that legislative or regulatory action be taken to ensure that, as the internet expands and evolves, organizations who have the ability to assign internet numbers to third parties be charged with a legal duty to maintain up-to-date Whois information." So basically, like a sex offender registry, only it never expires.
Exactly.
They have to know that your IP address went to you, and they have to be able to keep an eye on you, even if you've never so much as been accused of a crime. Now, ARIN CEO John Curran has rejected these accommodations, but so far that doesn't seem to have put the kibosh on it. Hopefully saner heads will prevail, but even so, it seems like this trend to centralize the internet and destroy its fundamental privacy and security will continue.
Indeed it will, and I think the both of us know why.
We live in a world where light bulbs connect to the internet, and recent attacks on them prove that your online security is under threat like never before. Not only your websites, but the internet-enabled devices you buy. And the biggest problem is weak passwords. That's why you need LastPass. LastPass allows you to randomly generate strong, unique passwords on the web and on your internet-enabled devices, all protected by one master password. LastPass sets up in minutes and gives you secure automatic logins throughout the web, synchronizing across all your browsers, all your computers, and even your mobile devices, at home, at work, or on the road. It even securely stores sensitive form data, including credit card numbers, backup sensitive documents, software licenses, Wi-Fi logins, and more. And with LastPass Premium, you can get these benefits on other applications, manage passwords for your entire family, and also get priority customer support. Sign up at password.bogosity.tv for a free month of LastPass Premium. Log in securely everywhere using the last password you'll ever have to remember. Go to password.bogosity.tv and get LastPass now.
And now it's time to pour quick-drying cement on this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And the very first one of 2019 goes to our Satsuma-in-Chief Donald Trump for his recent speech on immigration.
Ah boy, here it comes.
He said, quote, "Every day, Customs and Border Patrol agents encounter thousands of illegal immigrants trying to enter our country. Those horrible people trying to walk from point A to point B. How dare they cross our imaginary line?" He actually claimed, quote, "We are out of space to hold them." No, we aren't.
I never understood the quote-unquote economic argument for immigration. Why is increasing human capital a bad thing?
Well, worldwide, the population per square kilometer, excluding Antarctica, is 57. For the United States, it's 33, just a little over half. We actually rank 191st in population density. Spain, Hungary, Austria, Portugal, Denmark, Switzerland, and the UK all have greater population densities than the U.S., and, in fact, of the 108 million acres in the U.S., less than 5% of them are developed.
So, yeah, we're definitely running out of space here.
And that's, 20 seconds into his speech? Not doing well so far. I mean, he could have known that he was wrong about much of the rest of what he says just by going to the sources in my video, How to Argue for Immigration Restrictions, like when he said, quote, "All Americans are hurt by uncontrolled illegal migration. It strains public resources and drives down jobs and wages. But immigrants use fewer government resources relative to the taxes they pay, and each one creates 1.2 jobs for natives, even unskilled natives."
Again, why is increasing human capital a bad thing?
It increases productivity, which of course increases the supply of goods of which can be consumed by the native population. It makes things better for everyone. There's nothing wrong with an increase in human capital.
Yeah, and notwithstanding all that, I'm sorry, I have to say this, you don't have a right to a job or a wage. You have to compete for it. Just like everything else in life, stifling competition is bad.
Exactly.
And even then, doing so to inflate wages is not that good in the long run. There's gonna come a point where you have to accept that some jobs are being paid more than they're worth, and they're gonna subsequently cease to exist.
What matters is not the wage. Wage is just a number. What matters is the purchasing power.
Something that is, of course, very deliberately harmed by things like the Federal Reserve, as well as
the fractional reserve banking system.
Yeah, but I mean, if you have immigrants come in and they work for cheaper, that means that the products they make are going to be cheaper, which means that everyone else's paycheck is going to go further.
Exactly. An increase in human capital means more productivity. More productivity means more purchasing power.
Quote, Every week, 300 of our citizens are killed by heroin alone, 90% of which floods across from our southern border. More Americans will die from drugs this year than were killed in the entire Vietnam War. Well then, maybe you should end the war on drugs?
I mean, it's kind of sort of the war on drugs that's making heroin filled with fentanyl.
Well, they're not dying because heroin is bad. They're dying because when they purchase it on the black market, they don't know how much they're getting because drug dealers don't label their products.
Exactly. If drugs like heroin were in a free market, things like fentanyl filling them up would essentially be
outcompeted.
Well, I mean, even if it weren't, you would know that it has fentanyl and it has, this many milligrams or whatever. You would know how much you're taking and you would know how much the dose is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Monitored.
And I mean, the thing is, this isn't even a point about people being killed by immigrants because, first of all, drug trafficking has nothing to do with immigration. Immigration is the movement of people. Drug trafficking is the movement of inanimate objects.
Yeah.
And also, when people overdose on drugs, they're not killed by immigrants or drug dealers. They're killed by their own actions. They chose to take that drug. They know it's unlabeled. There needs to be some personal responsibility here.
Exactly. Like,
It's just another one of those prohibitionary rhetorics.
Quote, 1 in 3 women are sexually assaulted on the dangerous trek up through Mexico. Well, here's the question. Why would they have to take a dangerous trek? If there weren't any of these stupid immigration laws to begin with, it wouldn't have to be a dangerous trek any more than someone in Peoria would have to take a dangerous trek to visit their Aunt Tilly in Hoboken.
Like, even then, if immigration laws were lax to the point where the waiting list isn't a century long, you'd be able to properly monitor and search the incoming legal immigrants a lot better so that you can be rid of a lot of the more criminal and gangster immigrants.
Well, and maybe if they weren't scared of being deported, they might actually, go and report all of this rape to the police or whoever.
Exactly.
I mean, the only reason this is dangerous is because of this imaginary line that's only where it is because of a war, that it's just been arbitrarily decided that people don't get to cross.
Yep.
Quote, we have asked Congress to close border security loopholes so that illegal immigrant children can be safely and humanely returned back home. So, safely and humanely apparently means being taken from a place that is safe and humane to go back to some socialist rat hole where people have eaten all the zoo animals because government has inhibited food production.
This isn't even gonna... I'm not even gonna scratch the surface about how American-backed military coups during the Cold War as well as War on Terror has pretty much destroyed Latin America, causing this artificial migration cycles.
Well, and especially, Central America, look at like Belize and Nicaragua and places like that. They would be in a much better position if it weren't for those policies.
There's not just a large history, a long death list of interventionist policies of which have led to their destruction and subsequently the population running like hell.
So what's his solution to all of this? Of course, he wants to build the wall. I guess I have to give him one bit of credit. This was, as far as I could tell, during 2016, his one and only campaign promise, so at least he's doing something about it.
And hey, at least it's gonna be a $5 billion slap fence instead of a $25 billion pile of concrete.
But the problem is most illegals don't cross the border that way. They come in through checkpoints or come by boat and plane.
Well, that don't stop the orange man.
So this will sound familiar. He uses this same fallacy as the bordertarians, quote, some have suggested a barrier is immoral. Then why do wealthy politicians build walls, fences, and gates around their homes? I've said it before. I'll say it again, and I'll keep saying it till it sinks in. There is all the difference in the world, both ethically and practically, from a property line delineated by someone obtaining property via the fruits of their own labor, and governments fighting wars to determine which river or ocean or arbitrarily drawn lines within which they get to exercise dominion. The former is deontological ethics. The second is might makes right.
I have always been driven insane by the
Oh, you lock your door at night? That must mean you better support this $5 billion slap fence.
Now, of course, he did say politicians, and politicians get their wealth through theft, but still, their homes are owned. Unlike the entire country, how does any entity have the right to control and stop valid property owners from making full use of their property in the country?
Exactly.
And of course, like every politician, and make no mistake, Trump is a politician, just as horrible and psychopathic as the rest of them, he takes a big stinking crap all over the graves of people who have suffered and died so he can tug at your heartstrings. Quote, America's heart broke the day after Christmas when a young police officer in California was savagely murdered in cold blood by an illegal alien who just came across the border. So he was savagely murdered in cold blood when he was trying to use force to stop someone's liberty of movement without any cause to think he would harm anyone, and the guy resisted being immorally detained. I don't think he was the one who started that fight. Quote, in California, an Air Force veteran was raped, murdered, and beaten to death with a hammer by an illegal alien with a long criminal history. Wait, so he had a long criminal history, but you hadn't put him behind bars. According to the news story about it, he had been arrested 6 times in the 15 months prior to the Ferris killing. I don't think this one has anything to do with immigration here either. I mean, maybe if police weren't too busy harassing people and shooting their dogs because they had the wrong plant, they could have taken care of this guy.
Oh, hush you, Shane Killian. Don't you know that the police do no wrong? This was clearly the immigration's fault.
Oh, and by the way, there were 2 people involved in this attack. The second one wasn't an immigrant. Funny how Trump didn't mention him.
Oops.
Quote, how much more American blood must we shed before Congress does its job?
How many more children die before we need to ban guns?
Well, it sounds to me like this is the police not doing their job, not Congress. I mean, like I said, end the drug war. Trump, in as much as you support the drug war, you are responsible for all of the drug gang and cartel murders, whether immigrant or native.
Indeed.
And it's also funny how a few isolated examples of immigrants committing crimes means we have to somehow punish all of them, guilt by association. But no matter how many times police corruption has been shown to be systemic and universal, well, we can't do anything about that because these are our heroes and you're just talking about a few bad apples.
Our heroes that aren't obliged to protect us.
Quote, when I took the oath of office, I swore to protect our country. No, you swore to uphold the Constitution, a Constitution that gives you and Congress no power whatsoever to restrict immigration.
It's just another one of those modern presidential things where the Constitution is merely a limiter of government,
not what grants it its power.
It really seems like the best thing for this country would be if we built a wall in front of Donald Trump's mouth.
I'd argue around D.C., but we'll do so later.
That's the biggest band of criminals and terrorists you have there, yeah. But as it is, we'll just have to settle for making Donald Trump this week's biggest Bogon emitter.
You can save 15% or more at Amazon when you pay with Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash. Just go to purse.bogosity.tv. You can set your own discount. 5% gets you fastest delivery, or you can set it to 30% or more if you're not in a hurry. Purse makes it so easy to save money at Amazon by buying with crypto. Just go to purse.bogosity.tv and start saving now.
And now let's supersaturate this week's
Extraordinaire.
We've done Paul Krugman. We've done Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. We've done Matt Yglesias. This week, we do all 3, because they all sank to the depths of economic stupidity when they called for a 70% tax on the rich.
Oh boy, here comes the gold part I've been waiting for.
They like to pretend that this is the uncontroversial consensus of mainstream economics, as they do, but That's a load of crap. The consensus of economics, if there is one, is that this kind of tax is an immensely stupid idea.
But at the very least, they could have heard of the concept of a Laffer curve.
So we start off with the oft-resorted to fact that the rich paid higher taxes in the 1950s. Well, while it is true that the top marginal tax rate was 91%, basically nobody was paying that.
The effective tax rate in 1950 may as well have been 33%, not 92%.
Well, because the margin where that tax rate kicked in was $200,000 at the time, which in today's money is over $2 million.
Not to mention, back in the 1950s, there were a lot of loopholes and money shelters that do not exist today. So any potential consequences that the 92% tax rate might have had back in that day is going to be felt this time.
When it all shakes out, the top 1% in the 1950s only paid about 42% of their income in taxes, only slightly higher than what it is today. And the more you hike up taxes in these higher margins, the greater measures people will go through to avoid paying it. I mean, think about it. What do you think would happen if they made the top marginal tax rate 100%?
Like, a lot of people think that, the rich are just pouring their money into a large vault and swimming in it like Scrooge McDuck, when in reality, that large vault is either a bank of whom loans out the money, which I have issues with, but either way, but they're generally investing it in their companies. They're buying conveyor belts, industries, factories, paying wages, etc., etc. Like, it's not just money that's sitting there.
But if your goal is distributing income from the rich to the poor, that optimal rate is really around 30%. And if you're opposed to redistribution altogether, the optimal rate is more like 3%.
I think you and I know that the actual optimal point is about 0%, but...
That's true. But I was talking about, in terms of maximizing revenues for the governmental programs they wanted. But I mean, that's how much all of these entitlement programs are.
Oh, true, but I think that the best way we can maximize revenue for the government is to snap some spending on places that should not be spent on.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, this is probably the biggest fallacy in economics. You make one change and you assume that everything else will be equal, and the way it is, they won't. You might have the effect you want in the very short term, but, well, it goes back to what you said, what would have been done with this money. Ultimately, you're talking about removing investment dollars from the economy, which will stifle innovation, and they'll also just try to avoid paying it, like if you made that, 100% tax rate on above $200,000. Well, guess how many people in the country would only be making $199,999 a year? Hey, that's just what I made. I didn't make any more than that.
That's what a lot of these,
We need to cap the wealth cap. People don't understand.
Well, and it's also, they bleed on about the tax cuts. Well, you mentioned the Laffer curve. Last year, despite the GOP tax cuts, or maybe even because of them, federal revenues actually increased $100 billion.
And thank goodness, because of all the increased spending that's, ultimately been disproportionate to the rise in revenue, but...
Yeah, the national debt keeps ticking on up. What is it, 21 trillion now?
Oh, I think so.
Might even be 22.
But pretty much any of the papers you point to that support these higher top marginal rates assume that we're all going to share the same preferences, that people won't figure the tax rate into their planning, and that these tax hikes won't have long-term effects on investment and economic growth.
Yep.
I mean, really, you might as well just put in the tax code, magic fairies will save us. So all of that makes Krugman, Yglesias, and Cortez this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire!
Well, that wraps up this Don't Be Afraid to Care edition of the Bogosity podcast. Come join the discussion at discord.bogosity.tv and feel free to send a question, statement, news article, or rant in text or audio to podcast@bogosity.tv. This podcast depends on you to keep going, so please donate to Shane DK on PayPal, or if you want to use crypto, you can donate at altcoins.bogosity.tv. You can also support Shane DK on Patreon to get the podcast and my YouTube videos early and ad-free. Thank you for listening, and thanks to Hoplu for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Until next time, here's a quote from Thomas Sowell. In liberal logic, if life is unfair, then the answer is to turn more tax money over to politicians to spend in ways that will increase their chances of getting reelected. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License.
Bogosity.
You can now get 2 free audiobook downloads and a 30-day free trial at audible.bogosity.tv. Your choice from the world's largest selection of over 180,000 digital audiobooks and spoken word content for your iOS or Android device, Kindle, or MP3 player. Go to audible.bogosity.tv now.